I never thought I'd be the woman with a story like this to tell. At 43, I believed I knew the shape of my life, the steady rhythm of my career at Westlake Publishing, my comfortable apartment in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood, my predictable weekends with well-worn routines. I'd been divorced for 6 years, had made peace with solitude, and had convinced myself that passion was something that belonged to my youth, like concert tickets saved in shoeboxes or the reckless confidence I once possessed. When Simon Rayburn was announced as our new editorial director, I remember feeling a flicker of annoyance. The publishing industry was changing rapidly, and the company's answer was to bring in someone from the tech sector, someone who would inevitably view books as content and readers as users. I prepared myself for corporate buzzwords and soulless efficiency metrics. The morning of his first day, I arrived early as usual. October in Chicago paints the city in amber and copper, and Lake Michigan had been particularly beautiful on my morning walk, steel blue beneath a clear sky. I was savoring my coffee at my desk, reviewing manuscripts for the winter catalog, when Iki walked in. "You must be Catherine Adler," he said, extending his hand. "I've read your editorial notes on the Patterson manuscript. Brilliant work." I looked up, and something inside me shifted. Simon Rayburn was not the slick tech executive I had imagined. He was tall with dark hair that curled slightly at his temples, intelligent green eyes behind modern glasses, and a smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. But what struck me most wasn't his appearance. It was the way he talked about the manuscript with genuine enthusiasm and insight. He had actually read it. He had actually cared. "Thank you," I said, suddenly conscious of how my voice sounded, how my hand felt in his. "Welcome to Westlake." It wasn't until later that day, during the staff meeting, that I realized. Simon mentioned graduating college in 2010. A quick calculation told me what I didn't want to know. He was at least a decade younger than me. Perhaps more. I dismissed the flutter I had felt that morning as nothing more than surprise at having a boss who seemed competent. I was a senior editor with 20 years of experience. I had helped build Westlake's literary fiction department from the ground up. I hadn't survived this long in publishing by getting distracted by green eyes and thoughtful comments on manuscript notes. But over those first few weeks, something began to take shape between us, a professional respect that felt different from anything I'd experienced before. Simon valued my opinion. He sought me out for advice on the company's literary direction. We would talk for hours about books, about authors, about the future of publishing. He never made me feel like my experience was outdated or that my methods were too traditional. Instead, he seemed to draw energy from our conversations, building on my ideas with his own innovative perspective. "You're the heart of this place, Catherine," he told me one evening as we worked late, surrounded by manuscript pages and takeout containers. "Everyone knows it. The authors know it too." The autumn deepened. Around us, the Chicago winds grew sharper, driving golden leaves against the office windows as we worked. I found myself lingering later at work, volunteering for projects that would require his input, savoring those moments when we were alone in the conference room with only our minds and words between us. It wasn't until the Frankfurt Book Fair in November that I admitted to myself what was happening. The company had sent 5 of us to represent Westlake, and Simon and I found ourselves walking through the Old City on our second night there, having separated from our colleagues after dinner. Frankfurt was cold and beautiful, the medieval buildings illuminated against the night sky. We walked close together, our breath visible in the chill air, talking about the books we had discovered that day, the connections we had made. When it began to rain lightly, Simon guided me under the awning of a small cafe that was just closing. "Should we make a run for the hotel?" he asked, looking up at the darkening sky. I glanced at him in the soft light, raindrops clinging to his coat, and felt a longing so intense it nearly took my breath away. "Not yet," I said. We stood there, sheltered from the rain, and he told me about growing up in Seattle, about his parents who owned a small bookstore, about how he had always wanted to work with books, but had taken a detour into tech first. I told him about my childhood in rural Pennsylvania, about the library that had been my refuge, about my failed marriage to a man who had never understood why I would spend my life devoted to other people's words. When he reached out to brush a raindrop from my cheek, I didn't pull away. When his hand lingered, I leaned into it, ever so slightly. And when he kissed me, softly and questioningly, in the rain-scented darkness, I kissed him back. I've wanted to do that since the day we met, he confessed, his forehead resting against mine. This is a terrible idea, I whispered, even as my hands held onto his coat, unwilling to let him step away. I know, he said. I'm your boss. You're 35, I countered, finally saying aloud what had been an unspoken barrier. 36, he corrected with a small smile. And you're 43, I finished. Too old for this kind of complication. His expression grew serious. Catherine, I've never met anyone like you. The way your mind works, the way you care about stories, about getting them right. I don't see an age when I look at you. I see someone I can't stop thinking about. We walked back to the hotel in the rain, not touching, both of us silent with the weight of what had happened and what might happen next. At my door, he simply said goodnight, his eyes asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about my career, about office gossip, about the unprofessional mess I was contemplating. I thought about my body, which wasn't the same as it had been in my 30s, about the fine lines around my eyes, about the vulnerability of being desired by someone younger. I thought about Simon's hands, his voice, the way he looked at me like I was a revelation. In the morning, I knocked on his hotel room door, composed and resolved. We need to be clear, I said when he opened it, still in his t-shirt and pajama pants, his hair rumpled from sleep. If this, whatever this is, affects my position at Westlake, I'll walk away. I've spent 20 years building my career. I won't risk it, even for me? He finished, his eyes gentle. Catherine, I would never put your career at risk. What happens between us is separate from work. Always. People will talk, I warned. Let them, he said simply. I'm not ashamed of how I feel about you. When we returned to Chicago, we established careful boundaries. At work, we were consummate professionals. No lingering glances, no unnecessary touches, nothing that would suggest we were anything but colleagues. But in the evenings, we would find each other. Sometimes at my apartment, where he would arrive with books he thought I should read, or specialty coffee from a shop he had discovered. Sometimes at his loft in Rivers, North, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city I had lived in for decades, but somehow saw differently through his eyes. Winter descended on Chicago with its familiar ferocity. The lake turned iron gray, and snow transformed the city into something hushed and otherworldly. In that strange, suspended season, our relationship deepened beyond anything I had expected. Simon was different from men my age. He hadn't been hardened by decades of disappointments. He approached life, and me, with an openness that was both refreshing and terrifying. He wanted to know everything about me, not just the carefully curated version I presented to the world, but the messy, complicated truth. Tell me about your marriage, he asked one night as we lay in my bed, the wind howling around the building, the room warm with the scent of the dinner we had cooked together. It wasn't terrible, I said, staring at the ceiling. That might have been easier in some ways. It was just insufficient. David and I met in college. We built a life that looked right on paper, but there was always something missing, a depth we couldn't reach together. When it ended, I wasn't heartbroken. I was relieved. And now? Simon asked, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. With me? I turned to look at him, this man who had somehow slipped past all my defenses. Now I'm terrified, I admitted. I've never felt this exposed, this vulnerable. He pulled me closer. Me too, he whispered. But Catherine, being afraid together is better than being safe apart. The winter months passed in a blur of ordinary magic. Sunday mornings with coffee and the Times crossword, discovering his love for obscure documentaries, teaching him to make my grandmother's bread recipe, watching him shovel, the sidewalk outside my building after a particularly heavy snowfall, his breath visible in the lamplight. We argued about books, about politics, about whether Chicago pizza was superior to New York. It is. We built a private world that existed alongside our professional one, neither intruding upon the other. At Westlake, the spring publishing season was approaching, bringing with it the usual frenzy of deadlines and marketing meetings. Simon had proven himself to be exactly what the company needed: respectful of tradition, while unafraid to innovate. The staff that had initially been skeptical now rallied around his vision. I watched him in meetings, confident and thoughtful, and felt a pride that I had no right to express publicly. Only Megan, my assistant who had been with me for 5 years, suspected something. "You seem different," she told me one afternoon as she brought in a stack of manuscripts. "Happier?" I gave her a measured smile. "Just pleased with how the new leadership is working out." She raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. By March, the secret was becoming harder to keep. Simon had started talking about the future, about taking a trip together in the summer, about meeting his parents when they visited from Seattle. I found myself both yearning for and dreading this evolution. Being public would mean facing judgment, from colleagues, from friends, even from strangers who would see us together and make assumptions about why a younger man would be with an older woman. The breaking point came at the company's spring gala. Westlake had rented the rooftop of a downtown hotel, and the Chicago skyline glittered around us like stars brought down to earth. I wore a midnight blue dress that I had purchased specifically for the occasion, feeling both elegant and exposed. Simon and I had been careful all evening, maintaining a professional distance. But as the night progressed and champagne flowed, I caught him watching me from across the room, his eyes dark with an emotion that couldn't be disguised. When I slipped away to the terrace for a moment of quiet, he followed. "You're beautiful," he said, standing close enough that I could feel his warmth, but not so close as to raise eyebrows if someone came outside. "Simon," I warned, glancing toward the glass doors where our colleagues mingled. "Not here." "I know," he sighed. I'm tired of pretending, Catherine. I'm tired of walking into work every day and acting like you're just my senior editor. I'm tired of not being able to touch you when I want to, or tell people how proud I am to be with you." "It's necessary," I reminded him, "for both our sakes." "Is it?" he challenged. "Or are you just afraid?" The question stung because it contained a truth I had been avoiding. I was afraid, not just of professional complications, but of being fully seen in this relationship, of standing beside this younger man and facing the world's assumptions, of admitting, perhaps, that I wanted more than I had allowed myself to believe I deserved. Before I could answer, the doors opened and a group of colleagues spilled onto the terrace, laughing and carrying their drinks. Simon and I moved apart instinctively, the moment broken. Later that night, in the quiet of my apartment, we had our first real fight. Words that had been simmering beneath the surface for months finally boiled over. "I feel like you're ashamed of me," he said, his voice tight with hurt, "like I'm your dirty secret." "That's not fair," I protested. "You know the position we're in. You're my boss, Simon. Do you have any idea what people would say? About you? About me?" "I don't care," he exclaimed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Catherine, I'm in love with you. I want a real life with you, not just stolen evenings and weekends." The words hung in the air between us. He had never said it before, that he loved me. Neither of us had. "I'm scared," I finally admitted, my voice small. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you want someone younger, someone who can give you children, someone who doesn't have fine lines and reading glasses and a stubbornness built over 4 decades of life. He crossed the room to where I stood, taking my face in his hands. Listen to me, he said, his voice fierce. I don't want some hypothetical younger woman. I want you, with your brilliance and your passion, and yes, your stubbornness. I want your experience and your wisdom and the way you see the world. I want the life you've built, and the life we could build together. Tears filled my eyes. I'm afraid to believe you, I whispered. Then let me prove it, he said. Every day, for as long as you'll let me. That night changed something between us. I realized that in trying to protect myself from future pain, I was denying us both the joy of the present. The next morning, I made a decision. I need to talk to HR, I told him, as we shared coffee at my kitchen counter. I should probably transfer to another department. International rights, maybe. He looked startled. You love editorial. It's where you belong. I love you more, I said, the words still new and fragile on my tongue. And if moving departments means we can be together openly, it's worth it. His smile was like sunrise. Say that again, he requested softly. I love you, I repeated, stronger this time. Enough to face whatever comes next. What came next was not what either of us expected. When I spoke to Helena in HR the following Monday, explaining the situation with as much professional composure as I could muster, her response surprised me. Catherine, you're not the first colleagues to develop a relationship, she said matter-of-factly. As long as you both confirm it's consensual, and one of you doesn't directly report to the other, we can make this work. The editorial director position oversees multiple departments. We could restructure so that you report to Diane instead of directly to Simon. It seemed too simple a solution after months of secrecy and worry. That afternoon, Simon and I sat in Helena's office together, signing the necessary disclosure forms, feeling oddly like teenagers caught by the principal, but granted an unexpected reprieve. Well, Simon said as we left the HR office, walking down the corridor where anyone might see us. That's that. That's that, I echoed, still processing the shift. We're official, he smiled, then glanced around the empty hallway before quickly leaning in to kiss me, brief but unmistakably intimate. Dinner tonight? He asked. Somewhere public. I want to take my girlfriend on a proper date. The word girlfriend made me laugh. I haven't been anyone's girlfriend since the 90s. Get used to it, he grinned. News travels quickly in any office, but in a publishing house, where stories are currency, it spreads like wildfire. By the end of the week, everyone knew about Simon and me. There were raised eyebrows, certainly, whispers that I could feel following me down hallways. But there was also a surprising amount of support. Megan's delighted "I knew it," and warm congratulations from colleagues I hadn't expected to approve. Spring blossomed around us as we stepped into the light of an acknowledged relationship. Chicago shook off winter's grip, and the lakefront paths filled with joggers and cyclists. Simon and I walked along the water on weekends, his hand holding mine without hesitation. We tried new restaurants, went to jazz clubs, browsed bookstores where neither of us could resist adding to our already overflowing shelves. In May, his parents visited from Seattle. I was nervous to meet them, imagining their disappointment that their son was involved with someone older. Instead, Carol and Robert Rayburn welcomed me with genuine warmth. Over dinner at a restaurant overlooking the river, Carol leaned over to me while Simon was deep in conversation with his father. He's never been this happy, she confided, not even when he landed that big tech job everyone thought was so impressive. With you, he's himself in a way I haven't seen since he was a boy. In June, Simon asked me to move in with him. His loft was larger than my apartment, with an open kitchen where we both love to cook and enough bookshelves for our combined collection. Still, it wasn't an easy decision. My apartment had been my sanctuary after my divorce, the first place that had been solely mine. Leaving it felt like closing a chapter I had thought would be longer. "We could find a new place together," Simon offered when he sensed my hesitation. "Somewhere that's ours from the beginning." "No," I decided after careful thought. "I love your home. I want to make it ours." Moving day was chaos. Boxes of books everywhere, disagreements about furniture, the inevitable discoveries of each other's secret quirks and collections. By evening, exhausted and surrounded by half-unpacked containers, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor, sharing a bottle of wine. "Welcome home," Simon said, his eyes crinkling with happiness. That summer was the most vivid of my life. We traveled to Michigan for a week, staying in a cottage on the lake where we swam in the cool water and read on the dock and made love with the windows open to the summer breeze. We hosted dinner parties where our friends, his younger tech crowd, and my literary circle, mixed in surprising harmony. We argued about paint colors and kitchen organization and whose turn it was to take out the recycling, the beautiful, ordinary conflicts of a shared life. At work, our restructured reporting arrangement functioned smoothly. I found that I enjoyed working with Diane, and Simon and I discovered we could maintain our professional relationship alongside our personal one. There were boundaries, of course, topics we saved for home, disagreements that needed to remain outside the office, but there was also a deepened understanding of each other's strengths and challenges. "You should be running this place," Simon told me one night as we prepared for a major pitch meeting the next day. "You know more about publishing than anyone I've ever met." "Maybe someday," I mused, surprising myself with the admission, though I've never been particularly interested in the corporate side. "You'd be extraordinary," he said with such conviction that I almost believed him. As autumn returned, bringing us full circle to the season when we had first met, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. How could so much change in 12 months? How could my life, which I had thought was settled into its permanent form, transform so completely? One crisp October evening, almost exactly a year after Simon had first walked into Westlake Publishing, we strolled through Lincoln Park. The trees were turning again, gold and russet against the darkening sky. We stopped by the small pond where ducks gathered, our breath visible in the cooling air. "Do you remember what you thought when you first met me?" Simon asked, his arm around my shoulders. I smiled at the memory. "I thought you were going to ruin everything with tech buzzwords and efficiency metrics." He laughed. "And I thought you were the most intimidating woman I'd ever met, brilliant and beautiful and completely unattainable." "Unattainable?" I echoed in surprise. "Catherine, you were this publishing legend with impeccable literary taste and a reputation for not suffering fools. I was terrified of you, and then completely captivated." I turned to face him, touched by the admission. "And now?" "Now," he said, reaching into his pocket, "I'm hoping you'll agree to spend the rest of your life with me." The small velvet box in his hand caught the last of the daylight. Inside was a ring, not a traditional diamond, but a deep blue sapphire set in platinum, elegant and unusual. "Simon," I breathed, my heart pounding with unexpected emotion. "I love you, Catherine," he said, his voice steady even as his eyes shimmered with intensity. "I love your mind and your heart and your courage. I love the life we've built and the future we could have. Will you marry me?" The question hung between us, momentous and yet somehow inevitable, as if all paths had been leading to this moment by the water, with autumn leaves falling around us like blessings. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, comfortable in my solitude, convinced that passion belonged to youth, skeptical of change. I thought about all the moments since, Simon's hand finding mine in the dark, his voice reading aloud from a book he loved, his patience when I was afraid, his laughter in our kitchen on Sunday mornings. Yes, I said. The simplest and truest word I knew. Yes, I will. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, as his lips met mine beneath the gathering stars, I understood that love doesn't diminish with age, it deepens, that beginnings can happen at any point in the story, that sometimes the most unexpected chapters are the ones that define us. I'm 44 now, engaged to a man 8 years younger, co-creating a life I never imagined. There are still raised eyebrows sometimes when people learn our ages, still moments when I catch myself wondering if this happiness can last. But then I look at Simon, at his eyes that see me so clearly, at his hands that know every inch of me, at his heart that chose mine out of all others. And I know that some risks are worth taking, some stories worth telling, some loves worth every complicated, beautiful moment.